Welcome back, everybody. Eric here, and I want to answer a question that I received recently. I thought was a pretty good one, worthy of making a video on. And someone asked me, they said, Eric, what do you prefer, a hammer-fired pistol or a striker-fired pistol? And what are the merits and flaws of each system? Great question, and it's pretty straightforward, okay? And we're going to dive into this. Before we do, I would like to thank our friends at SDI for supporting today's video. If you're looking for a career in the world of gunsmithing, they've got some awesome distance learning programs, great curriculum, wonderful instructors. Check them out for your higher education needs if you want to become a gunsmith. They also have some great drone programs, so check them out. SDI, Sonoran Desert Institute, and tell them Eric sent you. Okay, so when we talk about the way that these firearms work, we'll go ahead and just go over real quick. So this is a 1911. This particular one is a BRN 1911 from Brownells. You can see you have an external hammer, okay? 1911 uses an external hammer, but there's plenty of guns that use this type of a hammer arrangement. When we say a hammer, it's literally a hammer, and it falls when you squeeze the trigger, and it strikes the firing pin and sets off the cartridge. At a basic level, that's what's going on. Okay, that is one way of operating. The other way, all right, this is a Smith & Wesson Performance Center M&P 9mm with a nice Trijicon red dot. This is kind of a modern double stack 9mm. That's a Taran tactical extension, by the way, there on the bottom. Really nice pistol. But this is a striker-fired gun. So the way that a striker-fired gun works is you can see that here in the rear of the pistol, there is no hammer that's exposed. It's an internal striker mechanism that rides in a channel inside of the slide, usually cylindrical in shape. So it's kind of a cylinder-shaped striker mechanism that strikes the firing pin. And when you squeeze the trigger, it is preloading the striker, okay, preloading the striker and pulling it back a little bit, and then you squeeze the trigger, it releases the striker. So when the slide resets, it resets the striker, and then this trigger sort of stages it and releases it. At a bare bones level, that's how it works, okay? So you can hear the striker click in there, but you don't see any type of a hammer in the rear. So are there merits and flaws to each of these gun designs? Perhaps there are. Let's start with some of the potential flaws maybe, okay? Well, some people, when they think of a hammer-fired gun, well, here's part of the basic issue, is that a hammer-fired gun is sort of a throwback to a lot of very old gun designs, okay? I mean, this is based on a 1911. This is a 1911, but remember, they don't call it a 1911 for no reason. They call it a 1911 because it was designed in 1911. And the guns that it was designed around were even older than that, okay? So you're talking very early technology, which is not a problem. But you can see that here in the rear, the hammer, the firing pin's right there, and it's exposed on the rear of the gun. Could a rock or some form of debris potentially hit or strike that firing pin and potentially set the gun off? Maybe. Could this become lodged with dirt and mud and grime and debris and then the hammer not be able to hit the firing pin? Absolutely. So that's one downside. Beyond that, though, are there any other major downsides to a hammer-fired gun versus not? I would say just from a military standpoint. I mean, obviously the 1911 was a very popular military pistol and was in service until the 80s, so it has to be doing something right. Well, that's because they also issued these guns in really nice military flap holsters that covered the gun up completely. So if the soldier was engaged in some, nasty environment, wet wind and weather and muck and mud and all sorts of things, those holsters, those military flap holsters, kept the gun reasonably clean in a dirty military environment. So that was one reason that they were so successful, is because of the good holsters that they issued with the guns to keep them protected. But at a core level, are there any good things about a hammer-fired gun compared to a striker-fired gun? Now, some striker designs withstanding, most striker-fired guns are only good for one attempt to hit the firing pin. Okay, so let's say that we're shooting a striker-fired pistol, boom, 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 click. All right, there's a live round in the chamber, the gun went click. Okay, it didn't go off. My options, now this is not every striker-fired gun, but let's just say most mainstream, high success, high production striker-fired pistols like M&Ps, Glocks, SIGs, etc., you're going to have to either perform, immediate action and re-rack the pistol and throw the dud round out, which you assume is a dud round, or was it a light strike? You don't know. All you're going to do is perform immediate action and continue firing the pistol. You don't get a second chance to set off a primer in a gun with a striker-fired pistol. Now, here's my argument to that. Some people will say, well, I prefer a hammer-fired pistol because if there's a dud round, I can just recock the hammer and shoot again. I disagree with that concept. I think that if there is a dud cartridge or a failure of the cartridge to detonate that is, let's just say it's not mechanical, you have to assume that it's not mechanical. If your gun worked up until that moment and a cartridge all of a sudden had a light strike or something, well, either the gun is deadline from there forward, or you have to assume that I would say the cartridge would be the culprit before the gun is. So even in the case of a hammer-fired pistol, I would still perform immediate action and re-rack the pistol and get a fresh cartridge in there. And in the process, I'm cocking the hammer, of course. So that point is relatively inconsequential to the tactical employment of either one of these gun designs, because my view is that if I have a dud cartridge in a striker-fired gun or a hammer-fired gun, I'm going to perform immediate action and remove the faulty cartridge and cycle the gun and get a fresh cartridge in there and keep shooting. And if the gun has a light strike again, then I am to assume that that gun is somehow deadlined in some way, and I'm going to be looking for a different gun. I'm going to fight my way to a working gun somehow, or use a backup, or remove myself from the situation, something other than sitting there trying to, do this number. Oh, it's not going off. Oh, what am I doing? Pick my nose. No, you're either moving or reloading or doing something, but you're not going to stand there and fidget around with a hammer thinking that you're going to set the cartridge off a second time in the heat of the moment. I refuse to believe that's a valid tactic. People might argue with me, but it does come down to tactics, and more so even than the potential faults of the gun design itself. Now, are there pros and cons to each? Now, let's go back to the whole mud issue. Now, yes, can a 1911 become easily, or any hammer-fired gun, can it reasonably become easily caked up with grime and dirt and dust bunnies and things and cause it to potentially not work? Absolutely. Do you have a much better chance of this gun failing to work because of mud and dirt and debris? Absolutely not. Because the striker is internal. It is inside the gun, and it is reasonably well protected from outside influence, barring some ridiculously nasty crud. Generally, your pistol is going to work much more reliably as a striker-fired gun than it is a hammer-fired gun. So I think that people who put a lot of stock into, it's the second strike capability with a hammer, that's probably a moot point. Compared more to the long-term reliability aspect of a hammer gun versus a striker-fire gun. So I would say striker-fire guns are going to be more reliable. They're going to be a little more capable against the elements. Okay, that's a fact. There's been plenty of testing that's proven that over the years. Is that to say that a hammer-fire gun like the 1911 is not a fantastic pistol, and that you wouldn't be well armed to carry one? I mean, this is a modern 1911, by the way. These are readily available. Well, why would they continue to make this gun if it wasn't good? Okay, so here we're back to square one, where the 1911 and variants of hammer-fired guns that we're talking about in the context of this video, they're still fantastic guns. There's nothing wrong with the Browning High Power. There's nothing wrong with the 1911. There's nothing wrong with the Beretta M9 or a Smith & Wesson Model 59. Or even a 226 SIG or something, right? Like, those guns are fantastic, and they're good for a reason, right? You get into a double action gun that has another squeeze available, okay? So this is a single action pistols. You obviously have to cock the hammer each time to get it to fire, or the gun resets itself. With something like a SIG 226, or a Smith & Wesson Model 59, or a Beretta M9, which is a more modern hammer-fired pistol, you do have a double action category that can give you potentially a second strike capability if that's something you really want to, dial in on or whatever. Especially if it's in the heat of the moment and you just quickly squeeze again. Maybe it is a dud cartridge and you do have a quick shot on hand if you need it. But I would say it's a relatively moot point. I think most malfunctions related to the gun just simply not firing are going to be related to the ammo being faulty, and I think that's going to be your culprit, and that your job needs to be to quickly get that bad round out of there and get a good round in. And again, even with the M9 and the SIG 226, obviously, those double single action hammer fired pistols have been in use for many, many, many years, militarily and with police, and they've held their own just fine. Of course, that is with a proper holster, and many times having a flap holster does help, keep some of the dust bunnies and crud, but the guns generally hold on their own pretty freaking well. I mean, there's a reason Navy SEALs, over the years have carried a 226 because it's a great gun. There's a reason, that the military chose the Beretta, the M9, and replaced the 1911 with a 9mm double single action pistol, which was not really much more than a modified, World War II type pistol. I mean, if you look at like the P38, Walther P38, it was a double action, single action pistol, and that was a World War II tech. So it's not like the M9 was groundbreaking or crazy or different or new. It was just a slightly different type of thing. I think the military was changing and the 1911s were getting old and they wanted to replace them. Anyway, I digress. I'm not going to get off on that tangent. However, both have their place, and I think both are perfectly fine. I think it does come down to preference. I would say that if you are going to be in a really nasty, dirty environment, that the striker fire gun is probably going to give you a slight edge over a hammer gun. I wouldn't really put much stock in second strike capability over either gun design. I don't really believe in that idea. I prefer to just cycle the gun and get the bad round out. That's me. Especially in a hot environment, if you will. If you're on the range, sure, recock it and try to get that round out of there and shoot it out. But in a tactical environment, I think your job needs to be to get the gun running again and to eliminate the variable. And the way you eliminate the variable is to get rid of the bad round and to absolutely assume that it's a bad round. That's my thoughts anyway. Let me know what you think. Do you prefer a striker fire gun or a hammer fire gun? Are there some things that I failed to bring up? Let me know in the comment section down below and we'll get the conversation going. Thank you so much for watching today's video. That was a great question, and I appreciate the person that asked it. Many more videos on the way. We'll see you soon.